Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this chapter. And these are just some of the high points. There's a lot more to it. There's honestly a lot more to it than what I've covered here in this lecture series. Um, the only way to really cover it would be to read you the book, and that would be really, really dumb. So let's hit some of the high points. VMware Workstation Pro includes VMware Workstation Player, which you can use um, to interact with appliances that you're not going to change anything about. If you're just going to use them and change their configuration internally and shut them down and go on like that, it's fine. There are a couple of easy ways to, there are some easy ways to create virtual machines. There's an easy install option. Things have changed between 12 and what we know in 14 and 15. Some of the things I think that used to be in the custom install option are now typical install options. So you can change the size, the amount of memory you have, change the size of the hard drive, things like that. Your edit menu will give you the preferences dialog box. These are global preferences, not specific to a given machine. VM Workstation Pro supports up to 10 virtual networks, including VMnet 0, which is bridged, VMnet 1, which is host only, and VMnet 8, which is shared. I think, essentially, if you create a LAN segment, it kind of ends up in host only mode, but those devices can still talk to each other. Now, when you're talking about VM specific options, there's a VM settings dialog box. I've mentioned both of these. There's your hardware tab, which is where you'll change things like hard drives or adding hard drive, memory, graphics, number of CPUs, the size. It'll be maybe a little difficult to change the size of the hard drive. You can do it every once in a while, but then you have to go into the OS and repartition the new space. It's like waving a magic wand over a physical PC and suddenly the hard drive is bigger. Obviously, it's bigger, but that's unformatted space. You got to do something with it. In the Options tab, you'll find things like your snapshots, your Unity view, shared files, etc. When you're building your RAM, you need to select the OS version. You need to make that selection correctly initially, because it will have implications for the amount of RAM it offers you initially, the amount of hard drive space it offers you initially, and then of course you have to go up from there. Don't just, unless you have a very good reason to do so, don't just click through, because it may not give you enough space. It may offer you 2 gigs of RAM when you need 4. It may offer you an 8 gig hard drive and you really need at least 15 or 16. Like sometimes if you build a Kali box, it may only offer you 10 or 12 gigs. If you're planning to, now with a Kali box, if you're not planning to install a whole bunch of new software, maybe that will work. But if this is a VM you expect to accumulate data over time, you really don't want to limit it to the bare minimum. You can also choose your adapter type, whether IDE or SCSI. If you choose SCSI, it'll treat it like a SCSI drive. If you choose IDE, it'll essentially still treat it like SATA. You can also choose other options if necessary. You can configure the CD device in the virtual machine hardware tab or the virtual machine settings. If you miss it during the initial configuration of, say, pointing at an ISO, snapshots are very useful. You can roll back to a save state, then you can take a save state, keep going. If after a while you don't need that save state anymore, or you created a new snapshot, you can throw some of the old ones away. It's not really a good idea to let snapshots proliferate. You can also share and transfer files, dragging and dropping, sharing files, mapping virtual disks, but you need VMware tools for this. VMware tools is available both for Windows and for Linux. The install process is just a little bit different, but that's something you should get very, very comfortable doing. Unless you have a good reason to do otherwise, go ahead and install VMware tools on every VM you build. If for no other reason than you know how to do it, and you'll be able to do more things with the VM later. The last thing we can do is actually virtualize a physical machine. You can take a physical computer, VMware will analyze. Now, one thing to note here. If you're doing this, you need to make sure that physical machine isn't doing much. You don't want to do this while it's got all of its programs and services running. Actually, all its services need to be running so it will know what they should look like. But have everything ready to go, nothing happening. Don't update the software, don't browse the internet, don't check your email, nothing. So that as much as possible, those files are in a static, not so much frozen, but in a stable state, so that the virtualization converter doesn't have to worry about, oh, this file has changed, let me go do it again. It may not even try to do it again. It may just fail on you. So make sure if you're going to virtualize a physical machine that it's ready to go and that you're not doing anything else with it. If you have to do something else with it, maybe what you should do is prepare this sort of thing to happen during the off hours. Say, for example, you work from 9 to 5 and you leave the office by 5:15. Maybe the last thing you do as you walk out the door after you've shut everything down, saved everything that matters, etc., 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 is kick off that conversion process. Let it run overnight, so that when you come back in the morning, you have a working PC and a working virtualized form of that PC, which you can take with you or back up into the cloud or whatnot. This has been my video lecture series on Chapter 3. Thank you for watching, and if you're ready, move on to Chapter 4. Thanks. Chapter 4, by the way, I believe we're going to start talking about Hyper-V. Let me make sure of that just for a minute. Because Chapter 1, Overview. Chapter 2, VirtualBox. Chapter 3, VMware. Chapter 4, oh, my apologies. Chapter 4 is Data Center Virtualization and Cloud Computing, which we'll actually get back around to in Chapter 10. And then in Chapter 5, we'll move on to Hyper-V. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.